Welcome back to the CryptoInvestar Podcast. My name is Daniel Leinhardt. We talk about tokenization. Today I have a guest. He's called Mr. Reeves and he's from London. I happened to see him on LinkedIn posting about tokenization. He's amazing. He's well equipped. And I was like, I need to get him on the show. Hi, Mr. Reeves. Nice to see you.
Hi, Reeves is my first name. Knight is my surname.
Wow, that's really amazing. I saw you on LinkedIn talking about tokenization.
Yes, I guess right now it's a very popular topic. And although I'm currently at Commonwealth, head of digital assets and AI, tokenization forms, I guess, a part of digital assets. And right now it's a very topical part of digital assets.
If I might ask for somebody listening in, when did this entire tokenization technology or tokenization concept start? Personally, I just heard about tokenization around 5 months ago to really understand what it is, what they are trying to do. 5 months ago. When did tokenization start?
No, tokenization's been around much longer than that. It's only become, perhaps you've only heard of it 5 months ago, because in the last, I guess, year, it has become very hyped. And the reason people may not have heard of it before so much, not in its current guise, I guess. So everyone's heard of meme coins, altcoins, stable coins, and now tokens. But tokens have been a crypto asset for quite some time. It's just that previously they represented digital rights, not necessarily product that everyone understood, or usually it was to do with a Web3 or blockchain business or concept. It may have been a new blockchain and then they wanted to sell rights to it and they did it via token. But what happened was, I guess, and a couple of things happened in parallel. Cryptocurrency generally, whether it's, and everyone of course knows Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, had a wild ride and shot up, and of course it also had a wild ride back down and shot down in the last few, 5 months. And what's also happened is there were also a lot of tokens issued. There were platforms like Pump Fund, as an example, where crypto bros and crypto girls, I guess, hung out virtually and participated in token issuance, token trading. The idea was, get in early when something's issued, ride the wave up and, sell out, I guess. This led to a lot of, kind of behaviors that were reminiscent of very early days in equity trading in traditional finance. And of course, a lot of people lost a lot of money. I mean, they also anticipated making a lot of money. So they went along, they knew the risk because they thought they'd make, thousands of % return. But of course, they also lost a lot of money. And, getting the rug pulled or, rugging or being rugged was a term that everyone's heard of now because of that. And I guess in a way, a kind of, wouldn't call it necessarily a reaction, but then people started looking at what's the crypto investment, but with a little bit more reliability or a lot more reliability. And what happened, what drew everyone's attention was RWA tokens. Now, everywhere you look on LinkedIn, people are posting about RWA tokens. And RWA is real world asset.
Yes.
And I think that's probably where you've come across tokenization. Because whenever people talk about tokenization, that sort of term of tokenizing something has been around for a while, but what people are now referring to tokenizing something, they're talking about tokenizing a real world asset, not a crypto asset, not a digital asset, but a real world asset. And what that means is most people is making a digital representation on the blockchain of a real world asset. We can get into later how that happens, but that's what tokenization means. And I guess there's been a lot of popularity and hype in tokenization, particularly in terms of real estate. And even now, I'm not necessarily a fan of this person, but he's got millions of followers plus many social media, and his name's Grant Cardone in the US. And he made a statement that he's got $5 billion worth of real estate in the US. He's going to tokenize it all.
Wow.
And then people see sort of headlines like that and, you know, see him making statements like that. And then they read people like Mr. Fink, who's the head of BlackRock, saying tokenization and tokenizing assets is going to be a major thing going forward. And now many of the big banks and financial institutions, Vanguard, BlackRock, Blue Owl, and others are getting into tokenization. And there's supposed to be, by the end of 2026, you know, 100 billion of assets tokenized by the end of 2026, which is, you know, I think last year it may have been 40 billion in total. So they're talking about a big increase this year in assets being tokenized. So that's driving a lot of attention. And that's probably why, you know, for someone like yourself who's never heard of tokenization and tokens before, why all of a sudden it's become something you're very aware of.
Do you think before tokenization came in place around crypto itself had lost meaning, had lost a sense of direction? It had become an industry where people were just coming in to trade and lose money, others getting money quick. Do you think it had really lost direction?
I think that's one way of putting it. And I think what it was is that early crypto days, and whether it was, you know, Satoshi and Bitcoin or the degens in crypto, it was a very new frontier and a very new area and very ideological. And if you talk about entities such as DAOs, if you've heard of DAOs,
yes,
you know, the concept of a DAO is pretty cool. Okay, so the whole crypto bro and degen focus in the early days of crypto was very cool. It was about decentralization. It was about taking power from the traditional finance institutions and giving it, I guess, to the people, for want of a better word. You know, and you know, on an ideological basis, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm personally a big fan. In fact, that's why although I'm a dinosaur, I'm, you know, in my mid-50s, and I'm truly a dinosaur in the crypto space in many ways. But what attracted me was I liked the concept of the decentralized, you know, I liked the concept of payment rails and the ability to transfer funds without traditional financial institutions who had, apart from regulations, had rules and procedures of how they did things that did benefit them without a doubt. And I've spent 25 years of a career in investment banking and I'm well aware of how institutions like that, benefit themselves and shareholders, obviously, but it's not that they're benefiting themselves, they're benefiting shareholders. But, the concept of degens and what they wanted to do with crypto, ideologically was great. Like most things that are ideologically great, the practical implementation, unfortunately, leaves a lot to be desired. And so that's where you come into the fact that in that early stage where it's kind of the Wild West because the technology was ahead of regulations.
Yes.
And although regulations slow things down in one way and seem to support the traditional financial institutions in many people's minds, the reality is what stops people losing a lot of money generally is regulations. It's not guaranteed, but the usual idea of regulations are twofold. I mean, one could say cynically somewhat, it's to enable sovereign nations to tax. This is number one. And number two is to protect retail investors in many ways. And in the ultimate, perhaps, paradox, the people taking the biggest risk in Web3 and crypto are the same people who would get the most protection in traditional finance. So it's a very funny paradox that, in traditional finance, the retail investor gets the most protection from government regulations in terms of investments, what has to be disclosed, how those investments are structured, how they're sold, what's mis-selling. The retail investor has a lot of protection in the investment space in traditional finance.
Yes.
But in the crypto space, there's been a lot of talk about how much money has been lost, and especially in the last few days with DeFi and the DeFi hacks, and how many hundreds of millions have been lost in DeFi hacks in the last, couple of months. Really, it's probably over 600 million, including yesterday's or this weekend's. So, incredibly, the people who would in traditional finance get the most investor protection are taking the most risk in crypto.
This phrase that is mostly used in tokenization, where people say, at first, when Bitcoin was coming on and other crypto tokens, they were like, they want to get off banks, they want to replace banks, they want to bring freedom back to the people. But then tokenization is here and it says, no, instead of replacing banks and all that and getting off regulation, we want to work with regulators. We want to work together with banks and have another different economic layer.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know if that's entirely voluntary, if you will. So I think what's happened is, as a result of all these, previous tokens in the crypto market getting pumped and dumped and people getting rugged and, losing money, there was a desire to have something more reliable. And two products in crypto really burst forward on the scene on that respect. One is stable coins, USDT, USDC. Switzerland's launching its own stable coin. Poland's, launching stable coin. Stable coins are getting really popular. And the other asset is real world asset tokens. So you can say they're being offered as your reaction to that previous slightly Wild West approach. But what happens is, it's not by virtue of the people who want to issue those assets, that they've become reliable or that regulations have caught up in many ways. It's that in order to maximize the benefits of those products, you do need some regulation. So I keep going back to the most popular tokenized product, which is real estate.
Yes.
Because it gets the most attention. Whether it's Grant Cardone saying he's going to, with his huge social media offering, following, saying he's going to offer, tokens, etc. And he's got such a following that, of course, he'll have buyers for it. But the problem is as soon as you start offering these tokens and they're going to pay an economic benefit, the regulations around the world, in bits and pieces, and some are a bit better than others, have slowly caught up in this. And in most places, in most jurisdictions now, if you have a token that's giving you an economic benefit, whether it's a portion of rental from property rentals, or whether it's interest on a debt or from a loan to a property, or any kind of economic benefit from having some sort of exposure to the asset, is now classed as a security token. And in most places, even if there's no token-specific regulations, they'll be treated as securities under the country's securities regulations. And as a result of that, if you're a token issuer, you're going to have to basically meet the regulatory requirements of whichever jurisdiction you're going to issue those tokens from. And by nature, that means the product becomes more regulated.
Yes.
And so what happens is you are offering a more stable product. And that stability comes from more than one element. It's not just because there's a real asset providing the income or providing the economic benefit. It's also that there's a certain amount of regulation that controls how that token behaves and the rights that the token holder has, etc. So the stability comes not just from the asset, but the fact that there is some more regulation around it. So I think it's the that popularity of those products now are coming because, yes, there's some stability, and hence stable coins and real world assets tokens, but both of them benefit from having some more regulation around them.
Okay, so how do I differentiate between a mere token with a token representing real assets? If I saw them online, do I actually differentiate them by price movement and the stability? Are real world asset tokens having a guarantee that for it will be more stable than the tokens we've had? Is there a guarantee that these real world assets that represent real values will actually, for them, be extra stable than these other tokens that we've been having, not representing anything?
First and foremost, there's no guarantees in life. So, okay, you're not going to say you guarantee anything with a real world asset token.
Yes.
The difference is the tokens that are not RWA tokens can represent anything. And so it comes down to what are they representing. And if they're representing a Web3 concept or idea or business where the income generated comes from things like gas fees and other infrastructure costs in providing Web3 products and blockchain, products, they're a little bit harder to price because what you're really pricing is the likelihood that the product that they're representing is going to have widespread usage. So, as an example, how do you differentiate between an Ethereum token and a Solana token? Okay, they're both tokens. They're not real world asset tokens. They're crypto tokens that represent the blockchain of Solana and Ethereum. What's driving their value? Well, ultimately, it's the perception of which blockchain has the most usage, which one of them will generate more value for the token holder in terms of fees that accumulate, and that drives the token price. That's just two easy examples.
What about?
I've simplified that.
Yes. Okay. Let me ask this also. What about a real-world asset token that maybe is representing a precious metal?
Yeah, they're very popular, and there's probably about, well, if you ask one of the AIs, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT, there's probably about 10 gold-backed tokens at the moment in the market. So I'm not including anything doing platinum or other metals, but for gold, there's probably about 10. Most well-known is Tether Gold. You've probably heard of them. Now, they're very interesting because they've chosen, and I've posted about this on LinkedIn. They're issued out of El Salvador, I think, from memory. They've chosen a jurisdiction for whatever reason it may be, but choosing that jurisdictions, I would say it suits the issuer more than the token holder. And so they've chosen that jurisdiction. They disclose very sparingly a lot of their facts. And so, as an example, they say they hold their gold in Switzerland, but they don't say where. They don't say which facility. It's meant to be the side of some mountain, maybe some bunker. Now, they say that's for security purposes, but they don't disclose which company does secure it, as an example. And you could say in Switzerland it might be Brinks, it might be Loomis, there's some very well-known companies that do gold storage in Switzerland. It wouldn't alter the security of that product by knowing who it was. So what they've done is they're very careful with their disclosure and how much they disclose to the investor. Now, it hasn't held them back. They're the biggest gold token by issuance in the world. But that goes back to what I'm saying, that many people who buy these products are the people who would get the most investor protection in traditional finance, but they don't in Web3 and crypto yet. And they probably don't look deeply enough into the product to fully understand their risks. And as an example, they'll look at the marketing and say with a product like that, well, a token is equivalent to holding so many grams of gold or an ounce of gold. And that may be true. But actually, if you look at the contractual rights of these tokens, because everything for most of these tokens is contractual. And before you get to the smart contract elements, but like the actual old-fashioned legal contract, what rights you have as a token holder are purely contractual. So because you don't hold the precious metal or the gold, you have a contractual right to it. Now, in Tether's case, you don't have any right to it at all in most cases, but what you have is the ability to claim on that gold and redeem a token for a certain amount of gold at a certain price. But here's what people don't realize, that to get the spot price of gold, which they keep quoting, you have to redeem a whole gold bar. But that's like 450 tokens or something like that. Now, most people don't own a whole gold bar. And for smaller amounts, where it's down to an ounce or below, you're not going to get the wholesale price. And in fact, you can't even redeem small amounts directly, from Tether. So people, in some cases, especially small holders and holders of like one token or very few tokens, might find that in theory they have a claim on the token, but it's very hard to redeem the product for a cash amount or a physical amount of the gold. So most people haven't read the conditions of redemption. And so yes, they are, these things, that's all great when gold's going up. But see, these tokens and storing the gold has costs, insurance and all the rest. And someone has to pay for the auditors to come every quarter and check that the gold's there. And there's all these costs, right?
Yeah.
And many of these tokens will absorb the costs and not charge the token holder. But if you read the contracts, what they say is that at certain circumstances they will absorb the costs, but in certain circumstances they won't, and the token holder will have to pay them. And they do that by subtracting a little bit of value from the gold allocated to your token. So over time, it could be that you have less gold than you thought. And that really depends. And you have to really read the fine print of your token. Now, I'm not picking on Tether specifically.
Yeah.
All the tokens have similar elements, but ultimately, what in most jurisdictions you don't have automatic rights. Unlike in securities law, as an example, in most countries, if you're a shareholder, you don't need a contract between you and the company, because shareholders have rights under public law in nearly every country. But token holders don't. Now, there are some specific exemptions to that. And as an example, Liechtenstein has some very, very good token-specific laws under the TVTG regulations, and they recognize tokens as a specific bundle of rights, and as a token holder, you have some automatic rights in addition to your contractual rights.
Yeah.
That's one jurisdiction, and not every jurisdiction is as good. So in that respect, you have to be aware of the jurisdiction that's issuing the token to see what public law rights you have, because the rest come down to contractual rights. And most people don't know and don't look into what their contractual rights are in these tokens.
Yeah,
it's all great when they're trading happily and it exists.
I think that these are really sensitive topics that need to be out there for the people to really know and understand before they get to invest into any tokenized asset. Because at the end of the day, we simply join in and invest in just because we hold the token, so we want to buy the shares and enjoy the benefits. But in case anything happens, it would really be hectic to prove anything by law.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's better now, but it's just that you have to understand, one, what your actual contractual rights are, and most people don't read that documentation, and also be aware of where the token's issued and what the legal rights are in that jurisdiction, because that's where you would have to enforce your rights. Now, I keep going back to the real estate token because it's such a popular thing. And what I see a lot, especially in the posts on social media, is everyone talks about fractionalized ownership with real world asset tokens.
Yeah.
And right, you've seen that. Everyone talks about
everywhere, and it's exciting.
So two things that pop up. Everyone says if you tokenize some real estate, you'll increase liquidity, and the fractionalized ownership will mean lots of people will participate in property ownership that otherwise wouldn't. Because property is an expensive asset. You can't afford a whole property, but you could afford a token representing that property. And it's a very, very popular post I see all over social media. And Grant Cardone, I keep bringing up because he made that specific post.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. In the whole world right now, and I mean this, in the whole world, of all the tokens in all the crypto space, there is only one property token, only one, that allows fractionalized ownership of a property, where the token holder actually owns a piece of the property truly. As in, because the title deed to the property is issued on-chain. It's a crypto-native title deed.
Let me ask a question really very quick right here. When you say fractional ownership of a property, let's say an apartment with 10 rooms, are you talking about a fraction of one room, like I own one room of the building, or I own 2 rooms of the building? No. Because actually, initially when I got to understand tokenization as like, okay, which means I can be in my country, but owning a fraction of a building, and I can say I'm owning 2 rooms on this apartment or 3 rooms. I can even take a flight from my country, go to this country, and I find my rooms available at this particular building. Try to educate me about fractional ownership.
Okay. Nowhere does that exist, what you just described. Nowhere.
Yeah.
There is only one property token where you own a piece of the property. Okay, fractional ownership would mean a piece of the property or a share of it. Now, if you have one apartment, doesn't matter how many rooms, but if that apartment is worth $100,000 just for a number, and then you offer 100,000 tokens worth $1 each. Well, if you own one token, you own 1/100,000th of that. If you owned 10,000 tokens, then you would own 1/10th of that property. So imagine then you were getting rent from that property. Whatever the costs, whatever the rent was after all the costs of running the property, if that was $1,000 a month was the rental return, and you had 10,000 tokens and you owned 1/10th, then you would get $100 of the rent. That's how it works.
Every single month.
Well, theoretically.
Okay. Wow. That would be really cool. Okay, when I was growing up, I used to hear some important men in my country owning shares in Pepsi, owning shares in Coca-Cola, and in a way they are getting passive income, big passive income every single month or every single year. They take a share, and it's in millions and millions of money. This is another form of having shares in different companies globally without you being there physically, but you're able to invest in them.
Yes, but here's what I want to make clear, that it's the concept of ownership. Because fractional ownership, which what everyone says, is in the token space only possible in 2 countries in the world right now. One is Dubai.
Yeah.
One is Dubai, and the second is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Mhm.
Now, those 2 countries have done some very advanced, they want to build a reputation in the crypto space and Web3. So they have made 2 things possible. They have made it possible that the title of the property is on the blockchain. So it's transferable and visible and transparent. It's blockchain native. It's not issued as a piece of paper. It is issued on chain. And they have also changed or made amendments to their property laws that recognizes fractional ownership. So it recognizes legally that you could have 1,000 people owning one apartment, as an example. So that doesn't exist in any other country. So, and currently, of those 2 countries, only Dubai has issued, via a company called Mint, they have issued a token, and that token gives true fractional ownership of the property. But to buy that token, you can't buy it because you have to be a resident of Dubai to buy the token.
So where do they leave a concept of global participation? Because
well, this is why I post a lot about this topic, because what people keep talking about on social media about fractional ownership of property and global participation, it's not there yet.
Not even with these companies in the US.
There is not one token in the world that gives you, for I'm only talking property here, and there's other assets are different, but for property, there is only one token in the world that allows fractional ownership right now. That's Mint. And to buy it, you have to have a Dubai resident card and buy it via an app in Dubai. So there's no global participation.
Yeah.
and it only works for Dubai property.
Yeah.
So it's a very good product. I'm not criticizing the product, but what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of hype in the market, and people are saying about fractional ownership, and they're selling, and there are other property tokens in the market. But what they are offering is economic exposure, not ownership. And that's very different.
Meaning, maybe it would be not possible yet with real estate fractional ownership, but when it comes to things like when a company tokenizes its shares, it can be globally participated.
Not possible in any country in the world right now.
Can't a company tokenize its shares right now and it allows global participation?
Okay, so what people, and there are tokens representing shares available, but what it is it's not a company tokenizing its shares. What it is a company tokenizing an SPV, and that SPV buys the shares of the company, and then you have a share in that SPV, but the shares are just normal shares.
So, okay. I think it's getting a little bit more advanced, but at the end of the day, am I able to make money after a month or after 90 days or after whatever period of time as agreed in my contract?
Well, that depends on the token. Now, I will use an example of, have you heard of a token that represents US treasuries called BIDL? that's launched by BlackRock.
Yeah, I've read it somewhere.
Okay, so it gets a lot of exposure because it was one of the first. And if you buy a BUIDL token, it represents a certain amount of US treasuries. And here's what people perhaps aren't aware of, and I've again posted about this on LinkedIn, is that everyone talks about tokenization as being very democratizing because it allows small investors to buy small amounts.
And that gives a very big
and gives global participation.
Yes.
Okay, that again depends on an individual basis. But right now, if you want to buy US treasuries and you want to buy it via the BUIDL token, BUIDL tokens start at $25 million US dollars. So you need 25 million as a minimum to buy into the BUIDL token of US treasuries.
No, wait. How much is each token right now?
So there's a minimum amount of 25 million.
Wow. Is it made for people to invest in, or it's for a certain class of people?
Here's what it comes down to. It's actually no good for most people. So, and this is what I'm going to come down to. So the BUIDL token, if you were a normal person with a brokerage account, there's technically no minimum that you can buy of US treasuries. You could probably buy 100,000 worth of US treasuries. Yeah. You don't need millions. And if you buy US treasuries, you get a certain amount of yield. If you buy, and also in terms of liquidity, the US Treasury market is, you'd call it hyper liquid. It's the most liquid tradable asset one of the most tradable assets in the world, has a huge, deep market. But the BUIDL token doesn't. It's a very limited market. So it's only limited to other people who can buy 25 million worth. And number two, the token charges 40 to 60 basis points as a management fee. So, but if you hold a treasury directly, you don't pay that management fee. So if you buy the token, you need a higher amount upfront to buy. So it's even more limited than regular treasuries, has a smaller secondary market, and it has a lower yield. So why would you buy it? Well, it's particularly designed to be used as collateral for a DeFi native company. So a finance company that does a lot of DeFi trading can make very good use of that product as a collateral product. But it's not a product even super rich person should hold, because they could get a better return and more security just by holding the treasury directly, not as a token. So tokenization is not always the answer. And people keep saying, oh, tokenize, increases liquidity, increases, global participation. Well, in the unregulated days, that was probably true too. But these days, because these things are considered securities, especially in the real world asset space, these things operate on whitelists. So you still have to fill out KYC information that's appropriate. So as long as you're from a country that's not sanctioned and you're not blacklisted as a person or, as a business, then you can participate. But, it's already getting, from a regulatory perspective, cutting down or restricting access to people who meet KYC regulations, who are from countries that are acceptable. It's not as free for all and globally participatory as the people on social media would have you think?
Well, when I just had a chat with a certain guy previously. He works with stock markets, and he was talking about that for him, he trusts companies where owners hold the biggest stock, like they have the biggest shares. Let's say they have like 90% of the shares, they still hold 90% of the shares. For him, he thinks that it is actually worth of them to ensure that the company still makes more profits. At the end of the day, they hold a lot of it and they wouldn't want to lose their money. Other than a company who hold 2% or 5% or 10%, they would really not care if it goes, it dumps or anything. So in tokenization, would you trust a company that is holding 90% of its token? Because at the end of the day, there's this phrase that says tokenization is basically for institutions more than retail investors. So would you think it is more safe for somebody to trust a tokenization company that holds 90% of its tokens than this one that is simply holding 10% or 5%? What do you think about that?
I don't think that's the right view. I don't think it's even the right way to look at it. And the reason is forgetting about tokenization. Most people who invest right now in shares, the majority of people probably buy an ETF, an exchange traded fund, very common. I mean, BlackRock, Vanguard, and all those people, JP Morgan, they all sell ETFs because the majority of people for personal investment buy ETFs. They don't buy individual stocks. They don't buy shares in Apple, then shares in Microsoft or shares in General Motors. They buy either a mixed ETF or a sector ETF, which might focus on technology, or it might be an ETF that represents the whole market, or So ETFs are very popular, and most people do very well out of the good ETFs. So the question is then, who owns 90% of the ETF? Well, no one person, no one owner, So that view doesn't really count when you start talking about share investments and tokenization. That view only really counts when more in small to medium enterprise where, yeah, sure, if you're a small company raising some funds in the market, then yeah, if it's a family company and the family retains a big ownership portion, yeah, that's probably one view of looking. They don't want to lose their company and they don't want it to go badly. So if they retain a large portion of their shareholding or tokens, that could be a view that management or the family's aligned and it's a better investment. That's certainly a view. But when you start talking about big companies, multinationals, there is in most cases, no one owner or majority owner that's particularly concerned with the company itself. They're all just big shareholders. And so that sort of view doesn't really come into play. With tokenization, you're only looking at, and this is where I think people, look, there's a lot of hype, and it's hype because it's crypto and it's new.
Yes.
But the concept of tokenization, in the way it's structured, especially for real world asset tokens, has been around for a long time because it's called, in traditional finance, a securitization. Now, if you traditionally took a bunch of mortgages from a bank and packaged them up into a special purpose vehicle and then said, okay, there's 100 million mortgages in this special purpose vehicle. And if you buy 10 million worth of that, 10% of that special purpose vehicle, you get 10% of the cash flow from those mortgages. That's how banks refinance their mortgage books for years. That's what capital markets have always done. So now, instead of just putting that securitization vehicle and selling the shares, you put it in a digital wrapper and you say, instead of issuing you a share, I issue you an electronic token representing certain rights to the economic benefits of that product. And that's it. So people get caught up in the technology, but in reality, the product is just a digital version of what's been around a long time.
Wow, that's really amazing. Okay, before we end this episode, I want to really ask you this really very quick. Where do you see tokenization by the end of 2026?
I think it'll keep gaining in popularity. It's its own hype train in many ways, because it'll keep growing, but not, and people will think that it's growing because it's such a great new product or because of the hype. What it's really doing is it's changing distribution and how products are distributed and held, really. So what's going to happen is, yes, the blockchain is great for holding assets, for tracking assets. And what's happening with the blockchain is payment systems will be updated, or, as they like to say in Web3, payment rails will be updated. And so traditional banking payment systems like SWIFT, as an example, which is a widely used international system for banks to pay each other and move funds internationally, it's at the moment undergoing a pilot with a number of banks to move its payment systems on-chain.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think they were using Ethereum blockchain with ZKPs, or zero knowledge proofs, to shield transparency and make the transactions private. It's that drive to change the underlying infrastructure of traditional finance that will drive tokenization. Eventually, what will happen is that shares will be issued on-chain directly rather than a certificate. And land titles will eventually be issued on-chain directly. When assets come to be issued on-chain directly, the concept of tokenization will stop. Tokenization is a stopgap. It's an intermediate product. It's there to provide some digital ability of handling assets in this temporary situation we're in, where we're adopting the blockchain and before things are completely blockchain native. So this is like a gap. Now, how long that gap is going to be, or how long that space for tokenization to grow as a product is, will depend on regulations. So in the US, they've just introduced some regulatory changes that will allow some tokenization of public shares in companies. That's a temporary measure again, but it will allow tokenization to happen easier.
Yeah.
But eventually, when countries start making the regulatory changes that in the securities laws that allows company to not issue a share certificate, even a digital one, but to allow it to be crypto native, blockchain native, then the whole concept of tokenizing won't exist, because once that's crypto native and on-chain, that can have fractional ownership immediately. You don't need to tokenize as a process. So what we now call tokenization is a temporary product. It will grow a lot because it'll be part of the fundamental shift of moving traditional finance products on-chain until all the regulations catch up to the technology. Now, whether that's 5 years or 10 years, it really depends on leadership and on the world. As an example, and I again use the property example, that 2 jurisdictions in the world now offer land title on chain, Dubai and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. If you take the UK has digital land certificates, but they're not crypto native, they're not on chain. The US, roughly maybe, it's under 10 jurisdictions in the US offer digital certificates, but they're not on chain. But the problem with the US is they have 3,200 land registries on a county basis. That if they were going to go on chain, that's a big project to change them all. So it'll take a while for regulations change to enable these structural changes to happen. But when they happen to allow shares and bonds to be issued crypto native, then tokenization will change as a product. And as an example, with bonds, the UK has just this year appointed HSBC and Orion to run a pilot to issue government bonds on chain. And Canada has just completed a pilot to do the same thing. So it's happening and it's great, but that's what needs to happen, that the products need to be, the financial products, the assets, they need to be issued on-chain crypto native. And then you'll truly have the benefits of tokenization. At the moment, the hype in social media is talking about benefits that are very selectively possible and not largely possible. But it is causing a lot of hype in the market.
Yeah. Wow. This has been one of the best insights that I have had. How I wish I can always have you every Monday for such amazing discussions. I would really want to have you back again to discuss about what you're doing in the industry, what you're building, what you're trying to put out there. It would be really amazing. But this is it for now. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, share it with a friend, and always tune in for other amazing episodes. This is the CryptoInvestar Podcast, and my name is Daniel Leinhardt. It is everywhere from Apple to Spotify, iHeartRadio, Deezer, Zeno FM, from wherever you listen from.